همزة الذي جمع مالا وعدده يحسب أن ماله أخلده كلا لينبذن في الحطمة وما أدراك ما الحطمة نار الله الموقدة التي تطلع على الأفئدة إنها عليهم مؤصدة في أماد ممددة صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Can we have another loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad? وعجل فرجهم. So the surah that we had recited today was a surah called Surah Humasa. It's the 104th surah in the Holy Quran. And it speaks about some of the sins that people commit. Some of the sins that they commit and how that will affect them. How they will be punished for it. It's another surah that's quite scary, like the ones we looked at yesterday. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَيْلٌ لِكُلِّ هُمَزَةٍ لُمَزَةٍ. Woe to every slanderer and backbiter. And we're going to talk about backbiting and ghibat a little bit today as well. الَّذِي جَمَعَ مَالًا وَعَدَّدَ. Who's gathered their wealth and they just keep counting it. All the money that they've got, they keep counting how much they've got. يَحْسَبُ أَنَّ مَالَهُ أَخْلَدَ. He thinks that his wealth will make him last forever. He thinks that because he's rich, nothing can stop him. Because he's got money, because he's got wealth, nothing will ever stop him now. He will last forever. That's what he thinks. كَلَّا. No. لَيُنْبَذَنَّ فِي الْحُطَمَةِ. He'll be thrown into the crusher, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, he'll be thrown into the crusher. And when we're asked, what's this crusher? He means the fire. The fire is going to crush your body and your bones because it is so hot. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْحُطَمَةِ. And how can you know, how will you ever realize what that crusher is, what that fire is? نَارُ اللَّهِ الْمُوقَدَةِ. It's the fire that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself has made arrangements for, that He had started Himself. التي تطلع على الأفئدة. It leaps over your hearts and it takes over your hearts when you're in that fire. إنها عليهم موصدة. It will be closed upon you. في أمد ممددة. It will be closed upon you and you'll be left stretched upon these pillars, these massive tall pillars. You'll be left stretched upon them. That's Surah Humasa. And in Ramadan, we want to focus on making ourselves better, improving ourselves. So I want to focus a little bit on just those first 3 verses of Surah Humasa. Because it speaks about certain sins in those 3 verses, and those are sins that we are all very much at risk of. Those are the 3 sins, or those are sins that we can all find ourselves prone to. And it's important that we remember we're not perfect. So we have to keep making an effort to not sin. It's not automatic, it's not natural that you just won't sin. No, you have to actually try and stay away from these things. You have to make an effort to stay away from these things. And the first of those is backbiting. The first of those is ghiba. Now, ghibat and backbiting is where you are talking bad about other people. But it goes deeper. Here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't just say the backbiter, He says, وَيْلٌ لِكُلِّ هُمَزَةٍ لُمَزَةٍ. The slanderer and the backbiter. So these are 2 different things. We're going to look at what they are, right? But we have to recognize how serious they are. So backbiting in particular, ghiba, there's so many narrations about how bad it is. In one of them, Imam Musa Kazim alayhi salatu wasalam, he says, مَلْعُونٌ مَّنِ اغْتَابَ أَخَاهُ. Cursed is the one who backbites against their brother. And when we talk about your brother, in all the hadith, in all the narrations, it means about the mu'mineen, about the believers, about the Muslims. If you backbite against another Muslim, you're cursed. If you backbite against another Muslim, against anyone is bad, but particularly against another Muslim, another mu'min, another believer, you're cursed. And that curse isn't the kind of curse that we or you might say, no, that's the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sending His curse down on those who backbite. But what is backbiting? See, the question was asked of one of our imams, what is backbiting? And what's the difference between backbiting and slandering. And we see that in a narration, a story of the time of the Holy Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The Prophet, he was sat there with all of his companions around him, right? His companions were sitting there, and the Prophet asked them, do you know what backbiting is? And so they replied out of respect. They said, Allah and the Messenger, so Allah and you, Ya Rasulullah, you know best, so you explain to us. Instead of giving the answer themselves out of respect, they said, Ya Rasulullah, you tell us. They said, Allah and His Messenger know better. He said, it is to mention about your fellow brother something that he would not like. Now, all of a sudden, backbiting grows into a much bigger thing here, because it's not just saying, oh, he did this or he did that. Anything that your brother or anything that another person would not like you to say about them, when you say that, it becomes backbiting. And so one of his companions asks the Prophet, but what if what I said was actually true? What if what I said about him, it was legit, it was real, he did that, or he was like that. He has that trait in him, or he did that thing that I'm saying. If that's the case, if it's true, then is it still backbiting? And so the Prophet replies, if what you said about him is true, then you have backbitten him. So you're doing backbiting if it's true. But if it was false, then you slandered him. So slander is another word where you talk bad about somebody else, but what you're saying, it's not true, it's false, it's fake, you've made something up about somebody. That's slandering. Backbiting is when what you're saying is true, but that doesn't mean you can say it. It doesn't mean you're allowed to say it just because it's true. You see, there's a great deal of punishment for those who backbite. There's a great deal of punishment for those who talk badly about other people. And in this holy month of Ramadan, while we're all fasting, well, not now, but while we're fasting throughout the month, we see that one of the benefits that we're told about fasting, and this is narrated to us from the Holy Prophet himself as well, he says that the fasting person, somebody who is fasting, they're called a Sa'im. The Sa'im, the person who's fasting, they're in a constant state of worship. Doesn't matter what you're doing, you could be sleeping, you could be awake, you could be relaxing, you're in a state of worship just because you're fasting, right? He says the fasting person is in a state of worship, even if he's sleeping in his bed, as long as he's not backbiting his fellow Muslim. That's the one thing that will stop you being in a state of worship. If you're backbiting, that worship stops. That sawab of the fast, it stops. And we're told that backbiting, it ruins your fast. It's not something that will break your fast so that you can start eating, no. But what it does is it means your fast won't be accepted. You won't have what's called kafara. When you break your fast intentionally and without good reason, then you have to make up for it in certain ways. You have to feed 60 people. You have to fast for 60 days consecutively. It's not easy. If you backbite, you don't have to do that, but your fast will not be accepted. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran, He speaks about backbiting as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran, He tells us what the pain of backbiting is. He says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I've mixed up my post-it notes. He says that for those of you who backbite, he asks the question. He says, "O you who believe, avoid much suspicion." So don't be too suspicious of people. Indeed, some suspicions are sins. So certain doubts that we have about people, they can cross over into the realm of sin. And then he continues on and he says, don't spy. So you know when you eavesdrop, when you try and find out something about somebody, when you look for something bad in somebody, don't do that either. And neither backbite one another. Don't talk bad about each other behind each other's backs. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He continues. He said, would one of you like to eat the flesh of his dead brother? Saying that if you backbite, if you talk behind someone's back about them, say something bad about them when they're not there, it is as though you're eating the raw meat of your brother who has passed away. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has likened it to. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying it is. That's what backbiting looks like. In the eyes of Allah, backbiting is the same as eating the body of your brother who's passed away. And you see, when it comes to all of these things, backbiting or any other sin, it's important that if we do it, we recognize it. It's important that once we recognize it, we try and make a change. And in fact, in one hadith of the Holy Prophet, he tells us that the abandoning of backbiting. So if you're somebody who backbites, right, that's a mistake, that's a sin that you've been doing, but you decide, I'm going to stop. You decide, you know what, all right, I'm going to make a difference, I'm going to make a change today, and I'm not going to backbite anymore. The Holy Prophet says that the abandoning of backbiting is more valuable to Allah than the performance of 10,000 rakat of recommended prayers. 10,000 rakat. Can anybody tell me, for the wajib namaz, how many rakats do we have to recite in one day? 17, right? Now imagine, that's one day. Fajr, Zuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha. What was that? 20. So we're at 17 for the wajib, 5 daily prayers, the wajib ones, and then they extend more and more for the mustahab ones for every day. Here the Prophet's telling us, for the mustahab ones, 10,000 rakat of recommended prayers. You could pray 10,000 rakat of recommended prayers, but if you are someone who backbites and you decide to quit, that is going to make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more happy. And that will make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more pleased with you than those 10,000 rakats that you were reading anyway. You see, to let go of a bad deed, to let go of a sin, is a very, very important thing. It's a very crucial thing, and we have to keep trying to. Like I said at the start, these sins, these mistakes that we make, they're going to happen. We realize that. But because we realize that, we have to constantly try and stop them. It's not naturally going to be something that we just don't do. It's not naturally going to be something that we avoid because we have to actually make an effort. You see, the world, it will tempt you, it will pull you in all sorts of different ways, and there's so many different sins that the world will try and get you to commit, but it's up to you to try and hold off. It's up to you to keep battling back and keep fighting back to make sure that you don't. The second thing that I want to speak about that comes from this surah is wealth, money. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's talking to us about what we do with our money. الَّذِي جَمَعَ مَالًا وَعَدَّدًا. They hoard all their wealth. They gather all of this money, they gather all of this wealth, and they sit there and they count it. You see, in Islam, to have money isn't a bad thing. To have money, it's not something that you should be ashamed of or that you shouldn't do, right? In fact, we have a hadith where one of our imams, he comes to one of his companions, and his companion is living in this very basic house, right? It's a clay house, nothing fancy about it, it's quite small. And the imam says to him, you have money, you have wealth. Why do you live in a house like this? So the man says, my father and my grandfather before him and my great-grandfather, they all lived in small houses. So I decided, you know what, I'm not going to show off and get a massive house. I'll stick with this small house, it's fine. And the imam tells him, no, you have money, you have wealth, use it. Get yourself a nicer house for yourself, a place that's better for you to live in. So to have money isn't a bad thing. But with every wealth and with every benefit and every blessing that Allah gives us, there's responsibilities on us as well. And the biggest responsibility on our money is two. One is that we earn it in a halal way, and two is that we spend it wisely and spend it in the way of charity. You see, charity is one of the most important things we have. To be able to give charity is a blessing in and of itself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's telling us again and again in the Holy Quran, the majority of times where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions reading namaz, at the same time He mentions giving zakat, giving charity. وَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ. In the Quran again and again you'll see it, they go together. And the reality is, when we give charity, it's not something minor. In fact, I'll go to the Quran before I come to that hadith. When we give charity, what we're actually doing is incredible. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He describes it in Surah Al-Hadid. He says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, إِنَّ الْمُصَدِّقِينَ وَالْمُصَدِّقَاتِ وَأَقْرَضُوا اللَّهُ قَرْضًا حَسَنًا يُضَاعَفُ لَهُمْ وَلَهُمْ أَجْرٌ كَرِيمٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, those who give sadaqah, those who give charity, the believing men and women who give charity, He says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will amplify it. So if you give £10, you'll get £100 back. You give 100, you'll get £1,000 back. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase whatever you give. And He says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them an honorable and a good reward as well. So not only will He give you more than you gave, but it's an honorable reward. But there's a little bit I missed in that translation, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't just say I'll increase what I give you. He doesn't just say that I'll give you an honorable reward. No, He describes the charity in another way as well. He says, إِنَّ الْمُصَدِّقِينَ وَالْمُصَدِّقَاتِ, meaning the people who give charity, the men and the women who give charity. And then He says, وَأَقْرَضُوا اللَّهَ قَرْضًا حَسَنًا. They give a loan to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in truth, when I give charity to a poor person that I see on the road, or I put charity in the sadaqah box at my house, or in whatever way I try and give some charity, what I'm really doing is I'm doing a trade with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm doing a deal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He Himself says in the Quran that we're giving a loan to Him. And whenever a loan is given, a loan has to be paid back. Now look, if I loan one of you guys money, I don't know if you're going to pay me back or not. I'd hope you would. But if that loan is to Allah, you can know that for absolute certain, you're going to get that money back. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, not just that money, but I'll increase it for you as well. And in the hadith, our Holy Prophet tells us really beautifully. He says, when a believer gives charity, it doesn't reach the hand of the beggar. The person who you're giving charity to, the money that you give, it doesn't reach the hand of the beggar until it is first placed in the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning what? First, Allah accepts that charity, and then the person you're giving it to receives it. So when you give charity, in whatever way, shape or form, whether that's with your money, whether that's with your time and your energy, whether that's with your ability to try and help people in whatever way you can, just know that what you're doing is you're doing a deal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just know that your reward is with Him. And not only is it an equal reward, yesterday we spoke about, فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَى. For every atom's weight of good you do, you will feel it. No matter how tiny it is, you'll get the reward. Here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, don't worry about an atom's weight. If you give charity, I'll increase it, and I'll increase it, and I'll increase it constantly. And those of you who are a little older in the room, there's not many of you, but these guys will be able to testify to the fact that when you give charity, I promise you, it comes back to you and you get it back tenfold. You get back more than you gave. And ask anybody who's lived and experienced life, and they'll tell you they've experienced it themselves as well. It's a reality. You see, we have benefits told for charity. There's the money benefit, that you'll get the money back as well. On top of that, we're told that it protects you from evil. It stops you from evil. We're told that it saves you from being stingy. And stinginess and extravagance, they're two extremes, right? Stinginess is when I'm not going to give anything to anyone. I'm going to keep everything for myself. And extravagance is where I want to show off and I want to make sure everybody knows how much I have and how incredible I am, how amazing I am. So, at the time of our sixth Imam, the Imam, he recites a verse of the Holy Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, those who when they spend are neither extravagant nor stingy, but observe a balance between the two. That's the correct path to be on, the path of balance, right? That's what Islam tells us. Don't be extremist to one side or another, but live your life in the path of the middle, the balanced path. So the Imam, he recites this verse of the Quran, and then to explain it, he takes in his hand a bunch of little pebbles and stones that were on the floor. He picks them up, just a few of them in his hand, and he closes his fist and he doesn't open it. He holds onto them really tight. And the Imam says, this is what stinginess looks like. I have it in my hand, but I'm holding onto it with everything I've got, really, really tight. And then, with his other hand, he picks up another handful. And this time, he picks up so many that he can't even hold them. They're all spilling out of his hand. The Imam says, that's extravagance. I don't need that much. I'm trying to get as much as I can, but it's more than I need. It's overflowing. He says, that's extravagance. And then he picks up another handful. He throws a little out and just holds them out. And he goes, this is how it should be. This is how you should be with money, right? Where you have enough for what you need. The rest of it you can give away, but you have enough for what you need. And that doesn't mean you have to live a difficult life or a struggled life. No, live comfortably. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. Have nice things. That's fine. But don't have more than you need. This verse of Surah Humazah that we started with, الَّذِي جَمَعَ مَالًا وَعَدَّدًا, that's speaking about people who have loads of money just sitting there for no reason. All they do is just count, oh wow, I've got this much money in the bank, I've got this much money in the bank. But that money's not doing anything for them. In their mind, they don't think, oh, I'm saving up for this. In their mind, they don't think I'm keeping it safe in case I have a rainy day, in case, I need to spend it on something. No, they're just thinking, I want to keep as much money as I can purely because I want to have money. That's not a virtuous goal. That's not something we should be striving towards. It's not something we should be looking for. With the money, what we should do is we should try and make sure that we understand why we're holding on to that money. We understand what we want to do with that money. If you want to be rich, and you should want to be rich, you should want to have money. You should want to be successful in this life, in every avenue, but know what you want to do with that money. Money is not the end goal. What are you going to do with that money? You're going to look after your family? That's good. You're going to buy a nice house? Go for it. You want to donate to the masjid? Brilliant. You want to give charity? Excellent. But know what you want to do with it. If you want a fast car, you can have a fast car. You can have a nice car. You can have a nice house. You can have these things. You can travel the world. Do that. Have the money, but don't just gather and hoard money for the sake of it, right? Just so that you can open your NatWest app and look at how much money you've got in there and be happy. There's no point in that. There's no value in that. So make sure that you are smart with your money. And the constant thing we need to remember is the giving of charity, especially in this holy month of Ramadan. What's one of the main reasons that we fast, guys? To remember what? The hunger of the poor and the needy. But what's the point of remembering it if I then don't do anything about it? What's the point of sitting here going, yeah, it's really tough for them, and then every night I have a massive feast at iftar and I never do anything for them? There's no point in that kind of remembrance. Try and give charity in whatever way you can, whether it's by giving your time, whether it's by giving your money, whether it's by making sure you keep a smile on your face. That too is granted as charity. But give charity, and constantly give charity, and do it to purify yourself, to purify your wealth, and do it with the thought that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm doing this deal with you. I'm trading with you in this moment. Keeping an eye on the time. The third thing I want to speak about, and it's the third verse of Surah Humazah. Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that those people who are gathering all their wealth, what do they think? They think that their wealth will make them immortal. They think that nothing can ever stop them because they're rich, because they're wealthy. Nothing can ever stop them. They're safe from everything. And what that is pride and arrogance. What that is a feeling in your heart that you're better than anything else. Why? Because I have all of this money. Pride and arrogance is despised, massively despised in Islam. In fact, can anybody tell me the very first instance where anybody showed pride or arrogance in the history of this world? Go on, Mesa. Iblis, Shaitan. How did Shaitan show arrogance? So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told all the angels, bow down for Prophet Adam, this creation that I've created, Iblis, he said, I'm not going to bow down to Nabi Adam. Why? What was Nabi Adam made of? Clay. And what is Iblis made of? Fire. So Iblis said what? I'm made of fire, he's made of clay. Why should I bow down to him? That's arrogance. The very first sin ever committed is arrogance, is pride. And so, I want to speak for a moment about that pride, about that arrogance. Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, he tells us where this arrogance comes from. He says that every arrogant and tyrannical person is like that because of a sense of inferiority that he has within themselves. People who are arrogant and they're proud and they're boastful, the Imam's telling us the reason they're like that is because inside them they see something they don't like. They see something inside them that they wish was different. They wish they were different. And because of that, they find other things to be proud for about and boastful about, and they become arrogant because of that. And the punishment of arrogance is very scary. There's a valley in hell, right? It's between these two massive mountains. It's a valley called Saqar. And that valley is reserved only and only for the people who are arrogant. And we're told about the punishment of that valley, the punishment of the people who are there, and how severe it is. We're told the punishment of this valley is so severe that the valley itself, the ground itself, will complain to Allah, oh Allah, this fire is too hot, I can't bear it. This punishment is too hot, I can't handle it. That's the ground in which the punishment takes place. Now imagine the people who are actually being punished there. You see, the intensity of the heat for those people is so great that even the ground which was created to punish those people won't be able to bear it. In another narration, we're told that on the day of Qiyamah, the people who are arrogant, for those of you guys who are here it was yesterday, we spoke about how people will emerge from their graves, and from their bodies and their faces, you'll be able to tell what their sins were. The sins of the arrogant, when they emerge, they will emerge with the bodies of ants. They will have the bodies of ants, and not only will they have the bodies of ants, but the people, does anybody remember, what will everybody be doing? How will they emerge when they come out of the grave? Scattered, like moths, right? They'll fly out. The people will be scattered. When you scatter, what do? You run in every direction. And when you run in every direction, you don't look at what's in front of you. You don't look at what you're stepping on. So we're told in the narration that on the day of resurrection, on the day of Qiyamah, the arrogant people, their bodies will become like ants. And all of the people running around, scattering around, they will be stamping on all of those arrogant people constantly as they rush around. That's the punishment, the first punishment of those who are arrogant, who have pride in their heart. So we have to make sure constantly that we try and avoid this pride and the arrogance that ever enters our heart. Because in a very famous hadith of the Prophet, he tells us that someone with even a mustard seed worth of arrogance in their heart, of pride in their heart, will never enter heaven. You see, there's certain sins that if you've committed this sin, you'll serve your time, you'll serve your punishment in hell, and then once you've served your punishment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow you to leave hell. He will allow you to go towards heaven and reap the rewards of the good things you did. Arrogance isn't one of those sins. If you die with arrogance in your heart, you will never see heaven. You will never see Jannah if you have arrogance in your heart. And not just arrogance, a mustard seed worth. A mustard seed is tiny. A very, very tiny amount. Arrogance is a very dangerous thing. It's a very dangerous thing, and it's something that at every instance and opportunity, we have to avoid it. Because we're told that arrogance is the best opportunity for shaitan to enter your heart. It doesn't matter what else you do. The biggest and most easy gateway for shaitan to enter your heart is when you feel arrogant and when you feel proud. But the reality is, arrogance, it's such a stupid thing for us. For somebody to be arrogant, for somebody to be proud, it's ridiculous. It makes no sense whatsoever. Because in reality, when we leave this world, when we go towards the next, what do we have? What do I have with me? Of all the money that I had, of all the cars, of all the power, of all the wealth, of all the houses, of everything that I had, what do I take with me into my grave? Nothing. Your good deeds, and that's it. Nothing else. So this arrogance, it has no basis. It makes no sense. And in fact, we're told that the people, Bani Adam, they will cry out, my wealth, mali, mali. They'll cry out, what happened to my wealth? What happened to my wealth? And the question will be asked, what do you actually possess of your wealth? What do you actually own that is yours and that can't be taken away from you? Everything we have, it can be taken away. And the question's asked really nicely, what do you have of your wealth? Except for what you give in charity, which you give away anyway. Except for that which you consume, which you eat, which is gone once you've eaten it. Or that which you wear, which wears out, the color runs, it rips, it gets old, you get rid of it eventually. What do you actually have that you own and you can say, this is mine and no one can take it from me? Everything can go. In an instant, you can lose everything. Pride and arrogance, it makes no sense. And see, we can humble ourselves in many things, but one type of pride that we have to be very careful of is pride in our worship. Because it's very easy for us to say, look, I'm not going to be arrogant about money, I'll stay humble. I'm not going to be arrogant because, because I'm good at football, I'll stay humble with that. I'm not going to be arrogant because I've got the best grades in my class, I'll stay humble. Or exercise, right, there's so many different things that we can say, you know what, I'm not going to be arrogant because of that. But the one thing that catches out so many people is arrogance in their worship.
Go to gym?
Yeah, when you go to the gym, you can be arrogant, you can think you're bigger than other people, but you have to remember to be humble. Now, when it comes to worship, there's a hadith of Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salatu wassalam. He says that two men entered the mosque. One was a devoted worshipper. He was a really good Muslim. He devoted himself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He worships really, really well. And the other one is a person who commits sins. They don't worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like that. They're not that close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They don't think about Allah, but they both entered the mosque. And the Imam says, when they left the mosque, the worshipper had become a sinner and the sinner had become the worshipper. He's asked why. He says, because the worshipper entered the mosque, and when he saw this guy who commits sins, he thought, I'm so much better than him. Look, I'm so much closer to Allah. I'm so much more religious. I'm so much better than that guy. And because of that thought, he became worse. He became the sinner. And that sinner who entered the mosque, he was constantly thinking, oh Allah, I've committed all these sins. I've done so bad. I've done so much wrongdoing in my life. Please forgive me. I'm so low in front of you in status, I'm so low, oh Allah, please forgive me. And so he became the worshipper. He became the one who was better off when they leave the mosque. We have to be very careful of pride in our worship, of not letting ourselves become proud when it comes to our worship. You see, humility is a very key thing. And if you become humble, if you make sure you have humility in your heart, then you can become amongst the true believers. Bibi Fatima al-Zahra, salamullahi alayha, she tells us in the khutbah of Fadak, she outlines what the purpose is behind the different ibadat that we do, the different acts of worship that we do. And she says that the purpose of namaz is to remove arrogance from your heart. The highest part of your body, the crown of your body, your head. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, rub that in the dirt for me. Show me how humble you are in front of me, that you will rub your head in the dirt for me. If anybody else asks you, bow down to me, tell them, who are you? Why am I going to bow down to you? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, bow down to me, rub your face in the dirt, rub your nose in the dirt for me. That's humility. And we see a beautiful narration where the Prophet, he sat with his companions and he asks them, why do I not see the sweetness of worship in you? He says, why don't I see the sweetness of worship in you? And the noble companions of the Prophet were amongst the best of worshippers. But the Prophet says, why don't I see the sweetness of worship in you? So they asked him, Ya Rasulullah, what's the sweetness of worship? What do you mean by that? And he replied with just one word. He said, it's humbleness, humility. That's all it is. The beauty in worship is that you humble yourself in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when you humble yourself in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you elevate your soul so much. To humble yourself, to give respect to somebody, it will never lower you. You never lose anything by being humble. No, you only gain. When you humble yourself in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will elevate you. He will raise you up. And in fact, the most beautiful example of this is in our salah. I want you guys to recite this with me. I'll start it off, you guys finish it off, all right? In our salah, after the second rakat, or after the second sajda of the second rakat, and the second sajda of our final rakat, we say, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasulullah. Before we say that the Prophet is a messenger, we say he is an abd. What is an abd? An abd is a slave, a servant. The greatest and the most important virtue of the Holy Prophet that we're told we have to remember in every salah is that he was a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most humble station you can reach in front of your Lord. But that's what Allah wants us to remember our Prophet by. You see, when you humble yourself, what you do in truth is you elevate yourself. When you give respect to other people, what you do is you gain respect from them. Constantly within our ibadah, with our knowledge, with our gym and our working out, and whether it's football or whether it's how well you do in school, whatever it is, the more you humble yourself, the greater your achievements become. The greater you're seen as. And we have to remember that constantly, especially in this holy month of Ramadan. All the ibadat you do, all the worship you do, remember that izzah, respect, it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَتُعِزُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ وَتُضِلُّ مَنْ تَشَاءُ بِيَدِكَ الْخَيْرُ. Izzah, respect is from Allah. And dishonor and disrespect, Allah gives that too. And He can give it to you at any point, whenever He wants to. It's in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And with that, I'll wrap up for today. In the end, we raise our hands in dua. We pray to Allah Azza wa Jalla, oh Allah, accept all our ibadat over this holy month of Ramadan. Oh Allah, allow us all to be safe from the dangers of backbiting and ghibah. Oh Allah, allow us all to be amongst those who give charity in abundance. Oh Allah, allow us all to protect ourselves from pride and arrogance. Oh Allah, for all those mu'mineen around the world struggling with ill health, grant them complete shifa. Oh Allah, for all those mu'mineen who have left this world, raise their ranks in Jannah. Oh Allah, hasten the reappearance of the Imam of our time and allow us to enter Jannah under his banner. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع الدعاء. Oh yeah. There were a few questions that were asked over the past few days. So for those of you guys who want to stay and listen to the answers,